The mules are in the corral. Welcome to Mule Talk, and I'm Cindy K. Roberts, your host.
And our author, TV personality, and world-renowned mule trainer, Meredith Hodges of the Lucky 3 Ranch. We are back on with zest, meaning as in high energy. I'm not talking about the bath soap. So here we go. You weren't expecting me to say that, I know, so I caught you off guard.
That's fine. I prefer Irish Spring myself.
Oh, okay. Yeah, cool. So
it smells better.
Yeah. We're going to talk about fine-tuning the rider and fine-tuning the aids. I enjoy these articles because they're really informative. So let's get started.
Sounds good, Cindy. Well, like I was telling you before we got on this podcast, we have gone through a lot of basic training with our animals by this time. These two articles come from chapter 27 and 28 of my Training Mules and Donkeys, A Logical Approach to Long Airs. And what's covered before that are the beginnings of the foundation of training for your mule and other equines, of course. And in conjunction with this book, I did tapes 1 through 10 with the details of the training that is outlined at the foundation level. And in tape number 5, we teach the rider balance, the balance seat. But riding a balanced seat is really not enough. You have to think beyond that. And so I don't think any training series would be complete without examining the principles and the philosophy behind the training program. And I'm going to get into a little bit of that this time around. My philosophy is based on the principles that I am not, in fact, training mules and donkeys. Rather, I'm cultivating relationships with them by assigning meaning to my body language that they can understand while I learn what they are trying to indicate to me with their body language.
Wow.
And so it's not just a matter of just riding a balanced seat and then everything's going to be fine. Now what we're going to get into is the way that my own level of understanding changes and grows over time through the training process. I believe that my animal's understanding grows too. In the beginning, the emotional needs of a young mule are different than those of an older animal. The young mule needs to overcome many instincts that would protect him in the wild but are inappropriate in a domestic situation. In the domestic situation, the focus needs to be on developing the friendship and the confidence in the young mule while establishing my own dominance in a non-threatening manner. This is accomplished through the use of a great deal of positive reinforcement early on, including gentle touches, a reassuring voice, lots of rewards for good behavior. Expressions of disapproval should be kept to a minimum, and the negative reinforcement for bad behavior should be clear, concise, and limited. And through the training process, the mule will eventually realize that you don't wish to harm him. He'll start getting some confidence himself, and he'll start to assert his own dominance, much like teenagers do with their parents, because now he's confident that this behavior is acceptable. When this occurs, you reevaluate your reward system and save the excessive praise that you've been doing in the beginning for only the new exercises as he learns it. Because what you're going to be doing from now, like in tape 5, you learned how to ride a balanced seat in the round pen while being lunged, and that was to kind of get your own body steady, so that you wouldn't be interfering with your animal's balance. But you have to realize that his balance wasn't perfect in the beginning either. He had to be rewarded because neither one of you were riding the ideal or doing the ideal balance. So it really wasn't correct what you were doing at that time. But he needed the constant rewarding with the crimped oats to be absolutely sure that the way he was behaving was correct. It was what you wanted, even though you weren't completely clear, and he wasn't completely clear in his response. You need to allow the learned behavior to be treated now as normal behavior. doesn't need to be rewarded that much anymore. We're going to move on to rewarding new behaviors, and we're going to get a whole lot more detailed in the way that we're riding and the messages that we're sending to our mule. This is the concept from an emotional standpoint of the delicate balance of give and take in a relationship. As in any relationship, you must be completely polite and considerate of your mule and donkey. After all, you can catch more flies with sugar than you can with vinegar.
Oh, yeah.
So that's really important to maintain the consistency. But up till now, it's taken you a long time to train yourself to be that consistent and to train your temper not to rise at the drop of a hat. And you've needed this time to build this foundation that you're going to work from. Now what you need to do is, now that you're not going to get mad at every little thing that goes wrong, you need to be considerate and think of your animal from a physical standpoint. In the beginning, unless you were a professional trainer with years of proper schooling, you weren't likely to be the most balanced and coordinated rider. You may lack absolute control over your own body language. And by the same token, the untrained mule will be lacking in the muscular coordination and strength it takes to respond to your request to perform certain movements. For these reasons, you must modify your approaches to fit every new situation and then modify them again to perfect it, keeping in mind that your main goal is to establish a good relationship with your mule and not just train him. It's up to you, the trainer, to decide the cause of any resistance from your mule and to modify techniques that will temper that resistance, whether it's mental or physical. For instance, I had a 3-year-old mule that I was trying to teach to lunge without the benefit of a round pen. Now, that can get really tricky. The problem was that he refused to go around me more than a couple of times without running off. I'm sure there's been a lot of people, and I know a lot of people have told me, I don't have a round pen, and I'm trying to do him on a lunge line, and this is exactly what happens. So at first, I needed to assess the situation by brainstorming all the probable reasons that he might be doing such an annoying thing. Is he frightened? Is he bored? Is he just mischievous? Has he been calm and accepting of most things until now? And most important, is my own body language causing this to occur? Once I was willing to spend more time with regard to balance on the lead rope exercises and proceeded to the round pen to learn to balance on the circle, I soon discovered that developing good balance and posture was critical to the mule's training. The reason my mule was pulling on the lunge line so hard was he couldn't balance his own body on the circle. So he ran off.
Wow.
Once I reviewed the leading exercises with him, keeping in balance, posture, coordination in mind, and then went to the round pen to learn to balance on the circle, I noticed there was a lot less resistance to everything he was doing. I introduced the lunge line in the round pen and taught him how to circle with slack in the lunge line. And then I taught him what the cue was going to be while he was on the circle to stay on the circle. With the slack in the lunge line, every time the outside leg came forward into suspension, I closed my fist on the lunge line, which made it just a hair tighter, but it was still dragging on the ground, but he could feel that. And the round pen fence was keeping him on the circle anyway, so he learned that when I squeezed and that outside front leg was in suspension, it was supposed to come over to the inside and stay on the circle. So When I took him into the open arena with the lunge line, it was much easier to keep him on the circle because I just watched that outside leg again, that outside front leg, and I squeezed my hand closed on the lunge line, and he recognized that cue and brought that front leg over and back onto the arc of the circle while he was circling with me, and he didn't run off anymore. Like humans, all animals are unique, and like humans, each will learn in his own way, in his own time. So you have to maintain your patience, and you need to learn to be fair and flexible in your approach to problems. Some of them will learn it fast. This particular mule that was bolting on the lunge line that I took to the round pin and everything, he was pretty smart, so he learned this pretty quick. But I found that it took a little bit longer with some of the other mules. You know, even though they learned the cue, they decided they were going to test it in the open. And when they did, I just took them back to the round pen and reintroduced them to the cue with the lunge line slack and everything. Then took them back out, tried it again. And pretty soon, after a few times, they got it. And they didn't run off anymore. But you have to be willing to just stop. And when they run off, you don't chase them because they love this game of chase.
Right.
And if they can get you to chase them all over the arena, then that's way more fun with them. You know, they'd much rather be doing that, you know, than really being obedient to this stuff. So, you know, you just don't make it fun for them, and you don't buy into that playfulness when you're trying to teach them something that is important in the learning process. If tag's going to be a game, then just make it a game. Don't do it while you're doing training with them.
Yeah.
You know, maybe turn them loose after the lesson and then go, hey, I got the fanny pack. You want to play tag? And tag them and then run away from them. Where you're initiating the chase game and they're not. They get to play, but they don't get to initiate it. That's being a leader.
There you go.
It's best to have a definite program that evolves in a logical and sequential manner that addresses your mule's needs physically, mentally, and emotionally. So you really, you need to define these things, and it's important that you do, and that you're specific. Be firm in your own convictions, but be sensitive to the situations that can change, and be willing to make those changes as the occasion rises. This is what learning is all about for both you and your mule. So you don't need to be strict and forceful and bullish in your being a leader. You need to be fair, equitable, and flexible in your demands, and be really polite, kind, and considerate of the fact that they may learn at a different pace, learn a different way, and be willing to change the approaches as these things arise. And just as mental changes occur, so do physical changes. As your mule's muscles develop and coordination improves, you will need to do less and less to cause certain movement. Example, in the case of the leg yield, once you get on and you're riding, you will learn that the more you turn your mule's head a little too far to the left will make it easier for him to move those shoulders to the right. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times you have to do things a little bit the wrong way to get the desired response in the beginning. So you shouldn't be afraid. And when you're ground driving, the same thing. You need to pull that line on the left a little tighter to get them to move laterally to the right. And so this is just given and taken and exaggerating the language between you and your mule, and it may not be right, in the beginning, but it will make him in a position where he's leading with his shoulder, he's bending through his torso, and not just bending his head and neck around, because when he's on the drive lines, he will have you will have your whip on his left side pushing to the right side. When you're riding him, you will be turning his head to the left, but you will be squeezing and releasing with your leg, and in some cases, you will be kicking him to make him go to the right at first laterally. Mm-hmm. And kicking isn't necessarily what we want to be doing either.
Right.
We want our aids to be light, but in the beginning, you may need to make an impression.
Sure.
And you may even have to wear spurs in the beginning, because he might just ignore your heel. This doesn't hurt. I don't guess I'll pay attention to that, you know. But if, I wouldn't use spurs with excessive rowels on them or anything like that. I have found that using English blunt spurs are better only if for no other reason than they don't leave any marks on the animal. And so you can get his attention without actually injuring him by gouging him and, making cuts and other kinds of injuries. You don't want to injure him. You just want to get his attention. And as he learns to move away from your leg or to move away from the whip, then you can start thinking about getting his body a little more correct in the movement by slowly bringing his head around and not having so much lateral arc, or horizontal lateral arc to his head and neck. You can begin to straighten it out, because your goal is to have his head and neck right straight in front of his shoulders and having him bending through the rib cage and not through his head and neck. He will bend a little bit when he's doing it correctly, doing lateral work correctly, a little bit through his neck, just to follow the arc. If you were looking from above, you would see there's an arc going all the way from his tail, right over his body, and right up his neck, so that when he's moving laterally to the right or to the left, he will be bending a little bit, but not very much. And that is what your goal is going to be, is to move to that correct way of moving. You will learn, too, when he's doing shoulder in, that the back half of his body is going to be on a straight track, and he will bend through the torso to bring his front shoulders over just enough so that if he's tracking left, so that the hind legs are moving evenly, but that the right front leg is moved over just enough to track in front of the hind left leg. And that will put him in the correct position for the shoulder in. But then again, when you're teaching the shoulder in, you may have to move that front end over even more just to get him to bend and to move forward down the track along the fence, using the fence to keep him from veering off to the right while you're tracking left. And so you do have to be willing to do things a little bit the wrong way by overbending your mule and overusing your aids, yet you put your mule on the road to the right way. You assimilate an action in response to your leg or to the whip that can be perfected over time, and be willing to wait for the time for this to evolve and only seek the perfect way in little tiny steps. In essence, you've simply told your mule, first you must learn to move away from my leg, and then you can learn to do it gracefully. If you think of things in those terms, eventually you will get to where he's doing things very correctly, but it's going to take a lot of time. Sure. And sometimes things that are not quite right in the beginning, to get your own body to simulate the correctness. In the beginning, for instance, the rider can't feel the hind legs coming up under his seat. They told me now when I was taking lessons, well, when you need to post, and when his hind leg comes up under your seat, that's when you're supposed to post up, And then when it goes away, then you post down, and I could not get it because I couldn't see the hind legs.
Yeah.
And I certainly couldn't feel them. So what I did was I realized that when I post up was when that hind leg was down under my seat, but that was also when the outside front leg was going forward. So I learned to think incorrectly, and I learned to watch that. I went up when the front leg went forward, and when it came back, I sat down on it. I could see the front leg. So when it came back down and I could see that it was under my seat, I sat down. And when it went forward, then I went up. And I learned to ride by being able to see the front legs. And you just got to remember, we all perceive things a little differently, and our perception depends on how we're introduced to something and whether or not we can understand or perform the task. And it's nearly impossible for the inexperienced horseman to perceive and control unused seat bones as a viable means of controlling the mule. Reins and legs are much more prevalent. In order to help such a rider perceive their seat bones clearly, it sometimes helps by starting to involve the whole lower body. That means, like earlier in my book, for instance, I suggested that to begin facilitating this action, you pedal forward. They tell you to pedal backwards so that you can feel the back legs coming under your seat. But when I pedaled backwards, I couldn't feel anything. I just felt discombobulated. So I thought, well, I think I'm going to pedal forward because I'm trying to keep up with the forward motion that I have trained my mule to do. And if I try to pedal backwards, I feel like I'm inhibiting that forward movement. And we might actually end up going backwards in our foundation training if I'm not confident, and in my own balance and my own ability to follow those back legs. So again, I learned to post when the front leg was coming back, but then I learned to follow it by just simply pedaling forward, and pretending that my legs were cut off at the knees, because you don't want those legs sliding on his side and bumping up against his side or anything. Right. And I didn't have the stability in my seat bones to control all that. So I just pedaled forward. Then I began to understand that when the foreleg comes back, the corresponding hind leg is actually coming forward under my seat bone. And when you begin to understand this, both mentally and physically, then you can begin to pedal backwards, because you will have more control of your own body, and you won't be inhibiting the control that your mule has in his own body. As your leg muscles become more stable, actual movement in your own body becomes less. More emphasis is directed towards your center of gravity, and more responsibility is placed on your seat bones. And using this approach, your muscles are put to active use and coordinate with your mule's body through gymnastic exercises, which will eventually lead to correct position and effective cueing. So you have to be willing to make these steps smaller. They're sequential, and they do lead to the correct way of cueing for the rider, but you got to be willing to realize that this achieving balance and harmony with your mule requires more than just balancing and conditioning your mule's body. As you begin to finish training your mule, you should shift to your awareness toward your own body. Your mule should already be moving forward fairly steadily and in a longer frame. Basically be obedient to your aid. The objective of finish training is to build the muscles in your own body, which will cause your aids to become more effective and clearly defined, because now you have more control in your own body. You're sitting on your seat bones. You're letting your upper leg move with his body, but your lower leg is more passive and maintains that balanced position and maintains contact with his torso, so that when you cue, you're no longer kicking him from being off balance and having the kick come out of nowhere and hit his sides. You passively keep those lower legs up against his torso, and then when you want to send him away from your leg, it's more a squeeze that goes back to position of hugging his torso. So it doesn't come out of nowhere, and your aids are no longer abrupt. This involves shedding your old habits and building new ones, which takes a lot of time, and it should not be approached with any impatience at all. Remember, there's just no shortcuts. If you want to gain this balance and harmony with your animal, in order to stabilize your hands and your upper body, you need to establish a really firm base in your seat and legs.
Right.
And when I say legs, I don't mean the whole leg. I mean the upper leg from the knees up.
Yeah.
If you keep your lower leg on his torso in a very passive way, you should still be able to drop the plumb line from your ear to your shoulder, down through your hips, through your heels, and to the ground. And if you're kicking, then the lower leg goes out of that position, if you can envision that. You take your lower leg out to kick, and all of a sudden it's too far forward or it's too far back. It's not on that plumb line anymore.
Yeah.
You want to keep it that way, but the way to keep it is to keep things supple and flexible by using them correctly. Another thing is, just like when you're walking by yourself as a human, and I tell humans on the tours, yes, this teaching your mule is very much like teaching yourself to walk in good posture, and the same rules apply. You always look where you're going to keep your head in line with the rest of your body. And as you ride your mule through the walking exercise in the hourglass pattern, try to stay soft and flexible in your... Now, this is walking your animal through the hourglass pattern while you're riding. Stay soft, relaxed, and forward in your inner thighs and seat bones. Get the sensation that the knees are, or that your legs are cut off at the knees. Let your seat bones walk along with your mule, light and in a rhythmic fashion with him right behind his front legs. If, while you keep your seat and upper legs stable and moving forward, when collecting the walk on the short side, just bend both knees at the same time and bump your mule simultaneously on both sides while you squeeze the reins at the same time. Your legs should always have contact with your mule's body in a light, hugging fashion, and real pressure should only come during the cues. In order to help you stay over the middle of your mule's back on the large circle, keep your eyes up, looking straight ahead. Shift your weight slightly to the outside stirrup. Feel it pull your inside leg snugly against your mule. Be sure that your outside leg stays in close contact with your mule's barrel as you do this, because what you're doing is you're creating a track for him to follow. This is what you're going to do on the corners coming into the short side. You're going to go ahead and put most of your weight to the outside leg. You're going to keep the lower leg on the barrel. You're going to put the weight right there on the cut off leg and slide it to the outside, and you're going to give your mule the inside upper leg to lean against. And this will cause him to bend through his barrel through the corner. And then as you come out of the corner into the short side, that's when you're going to take those lower legs and squeeze them simultaneously while you do a squeeze release on the reins, which will cause him to go into collection.
Right.
And then you're going to hit the next corner, and you're once again going to get into that position where your upper legs are supporting his bend. Your outside leg is going to bear the weight, and the upper leg, and the inside leg is going to let him lean against it while he's going around the corner, and you're just going to maintain the hugging through the corner. And then as you go down the long side now, we're going to let loose on the reins and let him go ahead and take that longer stride. And what you're going to do is follow his motion with your seat bones, with your upper leg, and you're going to walk with him with the upper leg, but you're going to maintain a passive hugging contact that is even and is alternately squeezing, not simultaneous, alternating squeezing, so you're moving with the forward motion down the long side. And then as you come to the next corner, then you just go into the same mode that you did before and get yourself ready for the corner by more weight in the outside leg, simultaneous squeezing of your lower legs to go into the corner and support him with the inside leg. This technique of changing these aids like this and having your aids applied in pieces instead of the whole leg or the whole rein, because your reins you're going to do squeeze release alternately going down the long side with the reins as well, but going through the corners, you're going to match the simultaneous squeezing of the reins with the squeezing of your legs. So this will check him and cause him to go into collection that way. And most people don't feel like they use the reins as much as they do. But if you balance on your reins at all, your animal will be unable to achieve proper hindquarter engagement, the ultimate balance. To help shift the weight from the hands and the upper body to the seat and legs, you can just do these simple exercises. You can put your animal on the rail at the active working walk. On the lines alongside, drop your reins like I talked about. Feel your lower body connect with his body as you move along. You will also need to tip your pelvis and let it move with his movement. It will kind of feel like you're arching your back a little bit and rocking your pelvis back and forth and back and forth. And if your lower leg stays in the correct position, your thigh muscles will be stretched on the front of your leg from your hip to your knee, and they will rock back and forth. It'll be tight, and then it'll be loose as you rock your pelvis. This is how you can tell that you're doing it correctly, because you will feel that tension from your pelvis to your knee, and that means you're following his movement. You're not inhibiting his movement. You will also feel a slight side-to-side motion as your mule moves forward that will cause your seat bones to move independently and alternately forward, along with the alternate pressure that you're doing with your legs. And then when you go through the corners, your pelvis will move with a simultaneous pressure from your legs. You're just learning to follow the rhythm and the motion with your body by maintaining this rhythm and body position without thinking about it. But this takes time and repetition, a lot of time. And you'll find yourself getting out of rhythm a lot in the beginning. Right. But just anything else, like anything else, if you spend enough time and you're consistent and you keep things slow and doable, then it will be good. But don't move on to the faster gaits until you have mastered this at the walk. Then, when you're comfortable at the walk, then you can add the variation to the trot. And you can do the posting while you're going down the rail. When your mule is coming into the corners, you can go ahead and get into your position for the collection for the corners. You can alternate between posting and sitting trot down the long side. You can alternate between letting him be connected on the reins a little bit down the long side, or you can go on a complete long rein, what they call a long rein, where you maintain some collection on the reins, but hardly any pressure at all. Do not ever go down the long side on a completely loose rein. If you do that, your mule is going to become out of balance completely.
Right.
It's just as if you let all your muscles go loose. You have to maintain some kind of connection. Then what you might do too is you can alternate, and play with your own rider position by go ahead and lowering the reins with a knot in the reins so you can maintain some contact with the bit and keep your animal in good posture, and then go ahead and raise your arms out in front of you, parallel to your shoulders. If he drifts away from the rail, you need to post with a little more weight in your outside stirrup and bring him back to the rail. And feel what these different rider positions that you're doing does to your mule, to the way he's traveling. And you can affect these things. If you post with a little more weight to the outside, like I said, it'll make him drift to the outside rail. You can have your arms out to the side and reach more to the outside as you post more heavily into the outside stirrup. If he's getting where he's racked your leg on the fence, then you might need to move him more to the inside. But you do it the same way. You just go ahead and put more weight in that inside stirrup, and you can have your arms out in front of you if he's going fairly straight. If he's not going very straight, then you can put your arms to the outside evenly on both sides, and then go ahead and affect his balance that way. And once you're really good at trot and maintaining your control that way, then you can go ahead and try things at the canter. And when you bring him into the canter, you'll find that it's easiest to ride with your arms out to the side to maintain your seat bone connection, and rotate your arms backwards. Because when you do that, it goes around and comes down your back and puts your seat bone right down into the saddle under the hind legs, and that's what you want. So you can kind of play with these kinds of exercises and rotate from bringing the arms out in front and see what it does, putting them off to the side, see what it does. And then when you're ready to slow him down into a halt, then what you do is you do exactly what I've told you before, and don't just slide him into a stop. You want to go through his gaits to come to a halt. So if you're in canter and you're rotating your arms backwards, that's putting your seat bones right on the hindquarters and the legs appropriately. And so then just do what's called a half halt, where you stay a little longer in the circle coming back to his hind legs, and you just kind of hesitate and keep your seat bones down a little bit until he's trotting, and then go ahead and maybe go into rotating your arms along with the front legs and the back legs, and you might even go into a windmill kind of a thing with your arms, because the trot is a two-beat gait. It's a little different, and doing the windmill effect will put you on the hind legs again at the trot. And then you go ahead and put your legs forward once the trot has slowed down a little bit, and we'll put more weight in your seat bones. And then as he slows more, put your arms behind you and sink into the saddle and say, whoa. If he doesn't whoa right away, you may have to reach for the reins and go ahead and give him a little tug until he whoas, and then tell him he's really good. And then you can pull some oats out of your pocket to reinforce it, because it's a new task. Walk, trot, canter, and all this before it's old hat. But doing it from your seat bones is new. And trying to make him pay attention to the seat bones is new. So he can be rewarded like that, and you reward him from both sides, just like you did when you were teaching him to stand still while mounting, so that he will stand still in the halt. And then after he's stood still and he's finished chewing, Then you can start rocking your seat bones backwards and ask him to back up. And you do that with alternate pressure backwards from the seat bones and your upper leg. If he doesn't pay attention to that, you'll have to reach for the reins again. And we're trying to do everything that we can without the reins. And you might have to pull in your lower leg against his barrel and push backwards. And you're going to do it with alternate pressure. And when he takes a step back, ask him only to take 1 or 2 steps back the first time and then reward him again, because this is a new thing. This is like, I don't want to pull on the reins. I want you to do this from my seat. So he will do that. And as you get him more used to this kind of stuff, you're perfecting your aids. And in doing so, you are paying much more attention to every little tiny way your body moves. So you are enhancing your own body movement, and that is becoming much more accurate with the aids. And as you do that, your mule is going to learn to differentiate seat and leg aids in each gait and through the transitions on the larger circle. And you can begin to work on directional changes through cones and serpentine and everything. And as you practice these exercises, you'll soon discover how even the slightest shift of balance can affect your mule's performance. In dressage, they say that the animal is supposed to look like he is doing of his own accord with no cues from the rider. When you have perfected your own technique, this is what it will look like. By riding without your reins and making the necessary adjustments to your body, you'll be able to condition your own muscles to work in harmony with those of your mule. As your muscles get stronger and more responsive, you will learn to cultivate more harmony and balance with your mule. As you learn to ride more by the seat of your pants, you will encounter less resistance in your mule, because most resistance is initiated by bad hands due to an unstable seat. As you learn to vary the pressure in your seat accordingly, you will also encounter less resistance in your mule through his back. Having a secure seat will help you to stabilize your hands and make rein cues much more clear to your mule. The stability in your lower leg also gives him a clear path to follow between the aids. Now, as you attempted the exercises in balance by riding without the aids of your reins, you probably discovered a lot of shifting of your own balance than you even imagined. This nearly imperceptible shift of balance, however, can grossly affect the balance of your mule. And until now, I've always given you a visual point of reference by allowing you to glance down at the outside front leg. Now you want to be more inwardly conscious of your own body position. You want to go and repeat the exercises that we talked about to cultivate this kind of sensitivity. But this time, close your eyes for brief periods to get the feel of each movement in your own body. Do not simply allow your mule to travel freely in any direction, because this will not give you an accurate feeling for any specific task. You need to plan your course of action. If, for instance, you set up your mule to bend through and impulse out of the corners, you can close your eyes for a few seconds down the long side and feel the balance that comes out of that corner when the movement is executed correctly. So you will go ahead and keep your eyes open and keep your aids simultaneously through the reins, the legs, the seat bones, and all of that, going through the corners, but knowing that you've got to keep more weight in the outside leg, upper leg, and brace your mule with the lower part of your leg through the corner. Then coming out of it, it's going to go to alternate pressure, like you're walking really fast down the long side, and you're going to be going straight, so that's a good opportunity for you to go ahead and close your eyes and feel what it feels like to be in harmony with your mule and going straight down the fence.
Wow.
And at first you're going to have to open your eyes at intervals, even down the long side, because it would be really easy for you to think that you're putting equal weight on both sides going down a straight line. But if you open your eyes, you're going to find yourself veering away from the fence because you're not going to be as equal as you think. You're going to close your eyes, feel what it feels like to be straight, open your eyes to check to make sure you're straight,
Right.
then get yourself straight and do it again.
Okay.
And just keep doing that. You're going to, a squeeze and a release from your inside leg will send your mule forward, and he should be sent into the outside rein. And this will correct his balance and keep him going straight down the long side. So when you're thinking about it, don't just think about holding him up with that inside leg. Think about sending him into the outside rein, because you can feel that, and you can feel if it's getting kind of tight or kind of loose. And you should have even pressure, even if it's alternate pressure from the inside leg to the outside rein, from the outside leg to the inside rein. And try to keep that alternate pressure diagonally. You need to learn about pressure diagonally, and always send him from an outside leg to an inside rein and an inside leg to an outside rein. You will soon discover that in order to do a circle in better balance, you have to have slightly more weight on the outside seat bone. This will situate your weight over the outside hind leg, which is the impulsion leg. Putting the weight over the outside hind leg clears the mule's shoulders, and it allows him for freer movement in front. If you ride on your inside seat bone, your weight begins to fall to the inside of the circle and puts pressure on the shoulder, inhibiting the upright forward balance. And this will put your mule on the forehand instead of engaging the hindquarters. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Remember to plan your course of action and use your half halts between the changes of direction and transitions from one gait to another. You cannot expect your mule to maintain his balance when he's constantly being surprised with changes of direction or gait. Use your eyes correctly to enhance your balance and to help you more realistically plan your course. Teach yourself to be accurate with your eyes. Look well ahead at all times and try to stay exactly on the lines and arcs to your circles, even if they're imaginary lines. You cannot expect your mule to maintain his balance when he is constantly being surprised with changes of direction or gait. You need to learn to use your eyes correctly to enhance your balance and to help you more realistically plan your course. Teach yourself to be accurate with your eyes. Look well ahead at all times and try to stay exactly on the lines you've planned on your circle, on the arcs of your circle. Do not just look right in front of yourself. When you plan a circle, look halfway around your circle so you can plan the arc more accurately. And then you can make the next half of the circle the same as the first half to complete your circle with minimal trouble. Keep your eyes on a visual horizontal line that runs parallel to the ground. Don't drop your eyes. Don't look up. Just keep them parallel to the ground. You have two eyes, and any movement as slight as a tip of your head to one side or the other can affect the upright balance of your mule. Dropping your eyes to the ground shifts your mule's balance forward and onto his shoulders, again interrupting his balance. Do small circles, but only as small as your mule can handle without losing his balance. Once he can easily maintain his balance without interruption, you can begin to decrease the size of the circles. Small circles are very demanding, so don't make them too small in the beginning. Keep your movements planned and large. They will give your mule plenty of response times through the planned movements and will allow you to ride and correct the balance with more ease. If for some reason your mule loses his balance, falls out, or rushes, stop him by using an even pressure on both reins with a squeeze release action. Sink your weight into your seat bones, and when he's stopped, back him up slowly and deliberately, remembering to walk backward with your seat and legs, one step at a time, and then calmly go back and try to repeat the movement. If he makes the same mistake a second time, halt, back up, and then walk back through that area that's giving you the problem. Sometimes they will go ahead and be good all the way around, but then there's one area where they just fall apart. You don't have to do the whole arena when they do that. Just back up down the arena and just do in that part of the arena what they're messing up. Resume trotting or cantering when he complies. When you approach the area again, slow him down again, go through and resume your plan. If he ducks out with you and begins to run, keep your connection on the rein that he has pulled as best you can, and try to stop him by pulling on both reins together with a light squeeze release action. Do not do one rein stops. Those are just a gimmick that pulls him off balance, right, brings him onto a small circle, but he will never learn to stop in balance if that's what you're doing.
Right.
Just try to verbally calm him, and when he finally stops, praise him for stopping. Then turn him with the rein that he has just pulled out of your hand. Don't go with the rein that he will go with easily. You pick the rein that he pulled, and you make him submit to that rein. And you should be able to do it from a walk or from a halt. And do not try to pull him around with the other rein, because this will cause him to lose his balance and will frighten him even more, and he may just bolt again. If he's praised for stopping, he will not be afraid to stop. If he's punished for running, he may never want to stop.
Uh-oh. True.
Yeah. It is true.
Right.
So that's why we do these things the way that I'm talking about doing them, because what you do in this finishing stage is vitally important to his responses when you're doing really complicated things, even on a trail ride. If he's drifting too far to the edge of a trail or something, you really want him to respond to your leg pressure and your seat bones first, and forget the reins, because you can be pulling him to the side of the trail that goes up, but he may resist and pull back on you to the side of the trail that goes down and get you both in trouble. So this is why these little tiny nuances are so important with your aids, and how you employ them is so vitally important, because you're teaching your mule, and he is learning whether you think he is or not.
Right.
But the main goal is to cultivate a mule that's moving calmly between your two hands and your two legs, and responsive to your changes, to the changes in your aids, to your seat, to your legs, and to your hands. If you keep your eyes focused ahead and your hands and legs evenly balanced over your seat bones, you can strongly affect your mule's vertical balance. Your correct and repetitive use of the aids will eventually allow your mule to become lighter in the bridle and more responsive. In addition, his muscles will begin to be properly conditioned. If he's pulling on you and he gets resistant in any way, the animal that is restrained and forced will develop muscles incorrectly. He'll get places where he's sore. And that will cause stiffness through many, many movements. Most commonly, you see a slight U in the base of the neck in front of the withers. This is caused by stiffness in the pole from riding from front to back rather than from back to front. Remember, we talked about your focus of your seat bones being moved from following the front legs by pedaling forward to pedaling backward. And that's how we teach the seat bones to ride from back to front rather than from front to back. We talked about how you put him diagonally on a straight line by riding from the hind leg to the diagonal front rein. And this is riding back to front. I ride my animals diagonally through the aids to get the best lateral and vertical response. I want to maintain good forward movement, which means that the impulsion must come from the hindquarters and from the push forward. Think of your hands and legs as four corners of a box that contains your mule. If you push forward on one side at a time, say from the left leg to your left hand, then it leaves the whole other side of the animal is unchecked, and he will proceed forward with a tendency to drift into the open side.
Right.
This is not straight. You have to ride alternately and diagonally from the left leg to the right hand and from the right leg to the left hand, from the hindquarters. This is why you ride from back to front, from leg to hand, in a diagonal fashion. It pushes your mule from the outside leg forward into a straight and balanced inside rein, and from the supportive inside leg to the outside rein. He remains upright on the arcs and sufficiently bent. The wider the space between your hands and between your legs is going to allow him what we call lateral play. And you will feel this in your mule. He'll waver in his straightness. So you want to keep your hands close together and your legs snugly around his barrel, so there's a lot less lateral play and a great deal more accuracy when you're doing your patterns. Think of your legs and your hands creating a train track with rails between which your mule must move. The wider the space between your hands and legs, the more snakier his movements will become. But what if he doesn't turn without you really pulling on the inside rein? He will turn if you do it correctly, because you should be pulling back towards your hip and not taking your hand away from his neck, because it should be reinforced with your opposite leg to make him do the turn. So if you pull and you take that rein away from his shoulders, you have broken your train track. Now your train track is broken, and it's got a ripple in it, and he can't follow it anymore. If you try to keep his head and neck straight in front of the shoulders, and when you wish him to do a turn, do a half halt to slow for the turn to alert him that a change is coming. Be sure to support him with your upper legs and your seat bones by putting more weight in the appropriate places when you do that. Keep your outside rein in contact and slightly checked, but not as much as your inside rein, so that you will have more tension on the direction of the turn, but you still have contact of all four corners of this box when he goes into the turn, to enable him to turn through his torso and not just take his head and neck around, because that will break his good posture if you do that. So when you're turning, you do want to keep contact on both reins and keep him sort of kind of on the straight line, but not really. You're going to get more impulsion if he's turning left, for instance. He's going to impulse things through his right hind leg to the left inside rein, which you're pulling back to your hip a little bit. And you're going to allow a little bit of play as he comes forward with the hind foot on the left side and goes into the right rein. but you're going to give him enough slack to just slightly turn his head to the left, but encourage him to really bend his body to the left and allow that turn to take place. Now, you don't want to check him too hard on the outside rein, because then he'll just turn around the other way. That's why it's really important to pay really close attention to how much tension you've got on both your reins and how much impulsion you are getting from behind. And as you repeatedly do these exercises, your mule will learn to bend his body through his rib cage and not just through his head and neck to the arc of the circles. And if necessary, and sometimes it is, because they may be stiff through the torso and not able to turn through the torso in the beginning.
Sure.
So what you do then is you do more pressure on the outside rein, and you bring his shoulders around without the neck bending at all. In fact, you might turn remember when we were doing the lateral move sideways, how we turned his head to the right to make him go left. In other words, he was in a counter bend.
Right.
And we had to have his neck bent quite a bit to make him do that. And then we slowly moved it in line with his shoulders as he perfected the move, and just keeping the appropriate bend for what they call a leg yield. Well, now if he is having problems bending to the turn, the same thing applies. They do get stronger on one side than they do on the other. And it may just be that he needs to be encouraged through the shoulders to keep a proper straight line down the long side. And you may have to turn his nose to the fence to bring the shoulders in line with the hindquarters. And you may have to ride him that way down the long sides just to get him go straight in the beginning. And then you can work on slowly, like you did on the lateral movement, bringing his head slowly in front of his shoulders to where he's actually walking down the long side in a very straight line. Now, I might say at this point, don't close your eyes until you've managed to do this, because,
Okay.
because otherwise you're going to think you're riding a straight line when you actually may not be riding a straight line.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the manipulated cues come before closing your eyes, and they come into play when you're trying to get your animal's body completely straight down the straight lines, bending through the torso, through the turns and lateral movements and all of that. You need to perfect that first. The finer you tune your own aids, the lighter and more responsive your mule will become. And the more in tune with his body you will be, so you will be able to feel the way he's going more than looking at the way he's going. So you will be able to keep your eyes straight ahead and look around the corners and everything without ever having to look down at his legs again, because you will feel it in your own body. You will be planning your course of action. And like I said in the beginning, keep your movements large and flowing. Keep your eyes looking ahead. Keep your aids even and close in. Employ the aids laterally while being strong and encouraging from back to front vertically. Do not be too concerned about where your mule's nose is if his body is correct. As he becomes more confident, fit, and relaxed, and as your aids become more correct, his head and neck will drop into the improved posture of their own accord. You do not have to move the head and neck. When the body is addressed and you are doing the right things for the body, it's just like looking ahead when you're a human being and making sure that your toes are pointed straight. Everything in the middle is going to drop into place. if your eyes are looking forward. So you don't have to worry about your head and neck. It's going to be okay. If you try to set the head and neck on the vertical before the body has been conditioned to balance and round, you will produce an animal with a hollow back and a lot of vertical and lateral stiffness. This will prevent him from correctly responding to your aids, even if he wants to, because he will be physically unable to do it. It may take a little longer to correctly condition both your body and his, but the result is a sound, cooperative animal possessing the mental and physical qualities necessary for the best performance upon your request. You may even experience the surprise of good posture, balance, and strength in your own body as well.
That is amazing. And all the details here, this is really good. This is going to really make your mule have more finesse.
And not only that, the changes, you will feel the changes in the way he moves.
Oh, sure.
And realize how important all of this is. Because when you were moving on an animal that was hitting the ground pretty hard and you thought he had hard gaits,
right,
he is going to float over the ground.
Yes.
And you're going to get the hair on your arms is going to stand up and on the base of your neck as you float over the ground and go, I have never experienced anything like this before.
Yeah.
And you haven't.
Yeah.
You have to put the time and the effort into it for both of you.
I remember the first time that this mule that I had years ago, and I was taking dressage lessons, and the very first time that she really got collected and started, she was on the bit, and it was the ultimate high. You know,
it is the ultimate high.
Oh.
And you know, I don't even see that very much in the Olympics.
Yeah.
I saw in 1991 Nicole Uphoff riding Rembrandt, and if you haven't watched that dressage ride, watch it.
Okay.
Because you can see there is not one bit of tension in that ride.
Yeah.
Not one bit. And they are literally floating over the ground. When they won, Nicole burst into tears. And that was just coming from the fact that she knew that ride was perfect.
Yeah.
She knew it. And she was wondering if the judges would recognize it. And when they did, it was the ultimate feeling all the way around, all the way to her toes, man.
Yeah.
I have never seen a ride like that since.
Wow.
But that was what inspired me to keep going, keep trying. Because I watched my mules out in the pasture go into that suspension, but they didn't do it all the way through their bodies. Mules have a way of sticking their nose in the air and prancing across the pasture
right.
with this ultimate suspension that just puts you in awe. And then you get on them and you wonder, why can't they carry me like that?
Right.
You know? Well, because it hurts to carry you like that, because they're not in good posture when they do that.
Yeah.
But the ability to do that is there if you cultivate their bodies so that they can move in good posture and carry you efficiently. Then they can do it with you on their back. Does that make sense?
That sure does.
Pretty exciting.
It is exciting. It's very exciting. I don't know. I could talk about this stuff all day, you know, but...
Right? Well, it just keeps challenging you, you know, and then you don't get the idea that you're done learning, because then you can see that there is so much more to learn.
Yeah.
And at every stage you will be challenged. It's just whether or not you're going to take up that challenge, and you're going to have the patience and the wherewithal to see it through.
You know, it's strange, because years ago I thought, as many others, that you couldn't train an older animal, you know, that you needed to get on them when they were real young, but that's not true.
I know, that's what I learned, the same thing.
Yeah.
And since then, and since going ahead and taking up the challenges that the mules have faced me with, I am still learning, and the latest thing that I've learned, having that all of my older mules are over 30 now, and they're still moving like this,
Sure.
and I can still ride them like this, it just shows me the longevity that they get from this core strength postural training. And then I also have a mule here that never had it. And I got him probably about 6 years ago when he was 25 years old. And he taught me that you cannot begin core strength training at 25 years old. That, to me, it just alerted me to the fact that isn't that comparatively about the same age as people are when they start actually losing muscle tone? And they have no more muscle to work with, that they start losing weight. You know, they can gain weight up to that point, and then they get to a point where they're so old, the muscle loses tone, and they cannot get strength again in their bodies. They can get strength with the muscle that they have, but it will never be toned like the muscle that they had. And this is another lesson that I just learned with this older mule.
Yeah.
He is now 30,
Wow.
31 years old, but he doesn't look anywhere near as young as mine do that have had this core strength. And he's not capable of doing the things that they can do. And he has internal problems, like he has a heart murmur. And he can't really even just walk along for very long. I have him open to the pasture because chewing is an effort, and he can't eat enough, actively and eagerly enough to build muscle on his body, to gain weight, so he's underweight. But it's all a condition that has developed over his years of non-core strength training, occasional riding. It's not overt abuse.
Right.
It's just that the people that had him didn't know any better. And they go, oh, yeah, he's 20 years old. So I'll ride him when I can. He's losing weight. Yeah, they all lose weight. Well, Cindy? That's not true.
Right.
It just simply is not true. If they can condition the weight over their postural core, then they might lose a little bit of weight, but they've got a postural core that's developed with a certain amount of muscle tone, but not only muscle tone, they have toned tendons, toned ligaments, toned soft tissue and connective tissue that's holding it all together. And they don't necessarily lose that rapidly. I would imagine, the mule that I had that lived till 41, now he was pretty good muscle tone and everything with his core strength through his 30s and didn't start losing it until 40. But this mule here lost it at, the one I'm talking about, he lost it at 20.
Oh, wow.
So there is a vast difference. And again, there are a lot of details to look at and compare. And the only way that you can really do this kind of a comparison is with a field study, with the animals themselves. And that's why I take on rescues that have problems, because then I can see what I can do with the problems and if there's any way toward rehabilitation. And we got a long way with rock and roll.
Yeah.
I got sort of a long way with Frances, the little mini mule. She will never like to work.
Right.
She will never be driven. She will do in-hand obstacles as long as she wants to.
Yeah.
But when she's done, she's going to let you know she's done.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's fine, because she's the seeing eye dog for my blind miniature horse. So she's got purpose in life. If God doesn't take him, and I figure he's got a purpose for him, and I best listen to that.
There you go.
And, and do my best to help them to do their best in the condition they're in, because they're still here.
There you go.
And I'm still here, so apparently he wants some more stuff from us, so that's what we're doing. And isn't that why we're doing this podcast? We've got lots to share with people, and I guess God wants us to do that. So that's what we're doing.
You bet. And now I am really hungry. So.
Oh, my God. We better feed Cindy.
Well, Meredith, this has been awesome. You have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will talk soon.
Sounds good. You enjoy your day, too.
Meredith's website is lucky3ranch.com, and you can call her at 1-800-816-7566. And I can be reached through my website, everycowgirlsdream.com.
Gotta go. My mule is looking for me.
Mule Talk is an Every Cowgirl's Dream production.